I have heard defendants deny many things in my courtroom. They deny anger, they deny jealousy, they deny being at a certain place, knowing a certain person, making a certain call, sending a certain message. But I will never forget the woman who looked me directly in the eye and said she was not obsessed with a man, while every piece of evidence in that courtroom told me she had built her entire life around watching his. Her name was Allison Pierce. 36 years old, well-dressed, soft voice, perfect posture, the kind of woman who entered court with a calm smile and a folder neatly organized with color-coded tabs, as if preparation itself could make her innocent. Across from her sat a man named Daniel Carter. He did not look angry. That was the first thing I noticed. Most men who file harassment complaints arrive frustrated, embarrassed, sometimes defensive. Daniel looked exhausted. His eyes were dark from lack of sleep. His shoulders were stiff. He kept one hand resting near his phone, not using it, just touching it, as if it had become both evidence and a source of fear. Beside him sat his wife, Rachel Carter. She was quiet, pale, and holding herself together in that careful way people do when they do not want the courtroom to see how close they are to breaking. The petition before me was for a protective order. Daniel claimed Allison Pierce had been following him for months, calling his workplace, appearing outside his gym, sending messages from fake accounts, leaving notes on his car, contacting his wife, driving past his home at night. Allison denied all of it. Her attorney, Mark Ellison, stood first and presented her as a misunderstood woman caught in a cruel exaggeration. He said Allison and Daniel had known each other from a community theater group. He said they had been friends. He said Daniel had encouraged that friendship and later regretted it when his wife became uncomfortable. Then he said the sentence that made Rachel Carter look up. "This is not obsession, Your Honor. This is embarrassment being turned into a legal weapon." I wrote that down, not because it convinced me, because it was dangerous. Good lawyers know how to reframe fear as drama and drama as weakness. If they can make the victim look embarrassed, jealous, or overreactive, they can make the court hesitate before calling a pattern by its real name. Allison sat still as her attorney spoke, too still. Her hands were folded on the table, fingers interlaced, nails pale pink, expression composed. She never looked toward Rachel. Not once, but she looked at Daniel often, not openly, not in a way most people would notice, just small glances. Quick, precise, measuring that unsettled me. In my years as a judge, I have learned that obsession does not always look wild. Sometimes it looks controlled. Sometimes it speaks softly. Sometimes it brings printed exhibits and smiles politely while the person it has been haunting can barely breathe. Daniel's attorney, Olivia Bennett, rose next. She did not begin with emotion. She began with time. "Your Honor," she said, "this case is about 284 days. The courtroom became quiet. 284 days. That is not an argument. That is a timeline, and timelines can be merciless." Olivia placed a chart on the evidence screen. It showed dates, messages, calls, photographs, security footage, and police reports. Each event was marked with a small red dot. At first, it looked like scattered incidents, then the dots filled the screen. January, February, March, April, May, June, a slow, relentless pattern. Daniel looked down as the chart appeared. Rachel closed her eyes. Allison tilted her head slightly, as if the chart was not frightening, only inconvenient. Olivia began with the first message. It was simple. "Good seeing you tonight." Sent after a theater rehearsal, Daniel replied, "You too, take care." There was nothing alarming about that exchange, and that mattered. Because many cases like this begin with something ordinary, a polite message, a friendly conversation, a moment that later one person remembers casually and the other person turns into a door. The message is continued. At first, Allison asked about rehearsals, then about coffee, then about Daniel's marriage, then why he did not answer faster, then why he had changed. Daniel stopped replying. Allison kept sending. One message read, "You don't have to pretend with her." Rachel Carter's face tightened. Another read, "I know you look for me when you walk out." Daniel shook his head faintly, almost to himself. Then came the message that made the courtroom shift. "If you keep ignoring me, I'll make sure she knows what you really are." Allison's attorney immediately objected, arguing that the message was taken out of context. I looked at the screen, then at Allison. She was staring at Daniel, not at the evidence, at him. I overruled the objection for the limited purpose of showing the communication history. Olivia asked Daniel to take the stand. He walked slowly, as if every step was humiliating. That is another thing people misunderstand about harassment cases. Victims often feel ashamed, even when they did nothing wrong. They wonder if they were too friendly, too polite, too slow to set boundaries, too afraid to sound rude. Predators depend on that hesitation. Daniel testified that he met Allison through a local theater group. At first, she seemed kind, intelligent, funny. She brought coffee for the cast. She remembered birthdays. She offered to help people run lines. Everyone liked her. Then she began focusing on him. She waited after rehearsals. She asked about his commute. She sent him songs. She remembered small things he had mentioned once and repeated them back weeks later. At first, Daniel said, "I thought she was just friendly." Olivia asked when he became uncomfortable. Daniel paused. "When she showed up at my office, the courtroom stilled. He explained that he worked as an insurance adjuster downtown. Allison had no reason to be there. Yet one Tuesday afternoon, she was waiting outside the building with 2 coffees. She told him she had been in the area. He believed her the first time. Then it happened again and again, different days, different excuses, same place." Daniel told her politely that she needed to stop. She apologized. She cried. She said she had misunderstood. Then she sent him 37 messages that night. Olivia placed them on the screen in sequence. "I'm sorry. Please don't hate me. You made me feel safe. I know you feel it too. Rachel doesn't understand you. Don't punish me for loving you better." Rachel covered her mouth. Daniel stared at the table. Allison finally looked away, only for a second. But it was the first time her composure moved. Mark Ellison cross-examined Daniel carefully. He suggested Daniel had enjoyed the attention. He suggested Daniel had confided in Allison about marital problems. He suggested the friendship became complicated, and Daniel later tried to rewrite it. Daniel listened, jaw tight. Then Mark asked, "Isn't it true, Mr. Carter, that you never clearly told Miss Pierce to stop contacting you until after your wife found the messages?" Daniel looked up. "No." Mark smiled faintly. Daniel continued, "I told her before that, in person, in text, through the theater director. And then through police." The smile faded. Olivia then placed another exhibit on the screen, a text from Daniel to Allison. "Allison, stop contacting me. Do not come to my job. Do not contact my wife. Do not come near my house." The date was March 11. The next exhibit was from March 12, a photograph from Daniel's doorbell camera, Allison Pierce standing across the street from his home at 1:43 in the morning. The courtroom went silent. Allison sat motionless, but Rachel Carter began to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just the quiet, exhausted crying of a woman who had spent too many nights wondering if headlights outside meant danger. Olivia zoomed in on the image. Allison was holding something in her hand, a small white envelope. Daniel whispered, "That was the first note." Olivia turned toward me. "Your Honor, that envelope was found on the Carter family's windshield the next morning." She placed a scanned copy on the screen. The handwriting was neat, almost beautiful. It said, "You can't keep what was meant for me." I looked at Allison Pierce. For the first time, her calm smile was gone, and then Olivia Bennett said, "That was not the most disturbing note." She opened another folder. Rachel Carter gripped Daniel's hand. The courtroom waited, and Olivia placed the next envelope on the screen. This one was addressed not to Daniel, but to his 8-year-old daughter's school. When Olivia Bennett placed the second envelope on the screen and said it had been addressed to Daniel Carter's 8-year-old daughter's school, I felt the air leave the courtroom. There are lines people cross in civil disputes, in broken friendships, even in ugly personal conflicts, but when a child's school becomes part of the pattern, the case stops feeling like obsession and begins to feel like invasion. Rachel Carter's face changed first, not anger, terror. A mother can hear danger in a sentence before anyone else fully understands it. Her hand went to her mouth, and Daniel turned toward her immediately as if he had already lived through the moment this evidence represented. Allison Pierce sat completely still, that same stillness again, not shock, not confusion, stillness used as armor. Mark Ellison rose quickly. "Your Honor, we object. The school communication is prejudicial and irrelevant unless counsel can establish my client sent it." Olivia Bennett did not argue emotionally. She simply turned toward me and said the envelope was recovered by school administration. The handwriting matches other notes already submitted. We also have security footage from the school entrance. Allison's eyes moved, only for a second, but they moved toward Daniel, not toward her lawyer. That mattered. People often look toward the person they fear losing when the evidence shows what they did to keep them. I allowed Olivia to establish foundation. She called Rachel Carter to the stand. Rachel walked slowly, her hands trembling. When she took the oath, her voice was thin but steady enough. Olivia began gently. Mrs. Carter, do you have a daughter? Rachel nodded. Yes. Her name is Sophie. Did Miss Pierce know where Sophie went to school? Rachel's face tightened. She wasn't supposed to. Did you ever tell her? No. Did Daniel? Daniel shook his head from counsel table, but said nothing. Rachel explained that after Allison began contacting Daniel repeatedly, she and Daniel tried to remove themselves from the situation quietly. They left the theater group. They blocked numbers. They changed routines. Daniel spoke with the theater director. They hoped Allison's would lose interest. That is another thing I have seen many times. Victims often try quiet solutions first because they do not want to escalate. They think distance will work. They think politeness will work. They think if they avoid drama, the other person will eventually return to reason. But obsession does not interpret silence as a boundary. It interprets silence as a challenge. Rachel said the first note on their windshield frightened her, but the note to the school changed everything. Olivia placed the school envelope on the screen. It was white, neat handwriting, no return address, addressed to the front office of Sophie Carter's elementary school. Inside was a typed message, not long. That was what made it worse. It said, Daniel Carter is not the man his family thinks he is. Protect the child from the lies inside her home. Rachel began crying before Olivia finished reading. The courtroom stayed silent because there are accusations that attack a person. And then there are accusations designed to poison the places where that person's life is supposed to feel safe: a child's school, a family's home, a marriage, a workplace. One by one, Allison Pierce had tried to enter all of them. Olivia asked what happened after the school received the envelope. Rachel said the principal called her immediately. Sophie was removed from class briefly. A counselor spoke to her. Rachel had to explain to school administrators that someone was harassing their family. Daniel left work and drove there in a panic. And how did Sophie react? Olivia asked. Rachel swallowed. She asked if Daddy was in trouble. That answer hurt the room, not because it was dramatic, because it was small. A child asking one simple question because an adult she barely knew had decided her school should become part of someone else's obsession. Mark Ellison cross-examined Rachel with caution. He knew the jury was watching a frightened mother. He suggested the note did not contain a direct threat. He suggested it showed concern, however misplaced. He suggested Rachel may have blamed Allison because she already disliked her. Rachel listened, then Mark asked, Mrs. Carter, isn't it true you were jealous of Pierce from the beginning? Rachel looked at Allison for the first time. No, she said. I was afraid of her. That answer landed cleanly. No anger, no performance. Just fear. Mark tried again. Afraid because your husband had become close to another woman? Rachel shook her head. Afraid because she learned our daughter's school after we blocked her. No one spoke for several seconds. That is the problem with direct truth. It does not give cross-examination much room to breathe. Olivia then called the school principal. Carol Whitman. She was a composed woman in her 50s, but I could see the anger beneath her professionalism. People who work with children carry a particular kind of protective discipline. They do not always raise their voices. But when someone brings adult chaos to a child's classroom, they remember every detail. Miss Whitman confirmed the envelope arrived at the front office on a Monday morning. She said security footage from the main entrance showed a woman placing it through the mail slot before school opened. Olivia played the footage. The screen showed the outside of the school at 6:18 a.m., still dark, wet pavement, Theppy sidewalk. Then a woman appeared near the door wearing a long coat and a baseball cap. She looked around, once left, once right. Then she slid the envelope through the slot and walked away. Olivia paused the video and enlarged the frame. The face was partially shadowed, but the posture, the coat, the bag on her shoulder, the way she moved, Daniel recognized it immediately. Rachel closed her eyes. Allison stared at the screen as if refusing to help the image become real. Then Olivia placed another exhibit beside it, a photograph from Allison's own social media profile taken 2 weeks earlier, same coat, same shoulder bag, same baseball cap. Mark Ellison objected. Olivia responded by presenting purchase records for the bag and location data from Allison's phone, placing her near the school at 6:17 a.m. That was when Allison's calm expression finally changed, not dramatically, but her lips pressed together. Her eyes hardened. And for the first time, I saw anger under the softness. The prosecutor understood exactly how to corner her psychologically. She did not accuse Allison of being emotional. She let Allison's own precision become the evidence against her. Dates, locations, objects, parts. Obsession often believes itself to be invisible because it hides behind ordinary acts. A walk, a message, a coffee, a note, a concern, a coincidence. But when those coincidences are placed in order, they become a map. And the map was now leading directly to Allison Pierce. Olivia then returned to the timeline. After the school envelope, Daniel filed a police report. Allison sent no messages for 6 days, then came flowers, not to Daniel. To Rachel, delivered to the Carter home, white roses, no card at first. Then the delivery company provided the digital message attached to the order. I forgive you for standing between us. Rachel's hands shook at the table. Daniel lowered his head. I watched Allison. She looked almost wounded by the display of that message, as though the court had stolen something private from her. That is another thing I have learned. People trapped in obsession often believe their imagined relationship deserves privacy, even when the other person never consented to be inside it. Olivia asked Daniel to return to the stand briefly. He testified that after the flowers, he changed his phone number. 2 days later, he received a message on the new number. Changing numbers doesn't change truth. The room became still. How did she get the new number? Olivia asked. Daniel's voice was tired. I don't know. Then Olivia placed a subpoena response from a phone lookup service on the screen. Someone had searched Daniel Carter's new number using his work email, home address, and vehicle registration. The account used for the search was registered to a fake name. But the payment card belonged to Allison Pierce. Mark Ellison rubbed his forehead. Only once, but I saw it. A lawyer can defend a client's explanation until the explanations begin multiplying faster than the defense can hold them. Then Olivia Bennett said there was one final piece of evidence for the day, a voicemail. Rachel reached for Daniel's hand before it played. The courtroom speakers crackled. Allison's voice filled the room, soft, controlled, almost tender. Daniel, I know you're scared because she's watching you. I know you can't speak freely, but I am not going away. I was there before she understood you, and I'll be there after she breaks. The recording paused, then her voice dropped lower. And if she keeps using Sophie to keep you trapped, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of mother she really is. Rachel began crying, Daniel's jaw tightened, and Allison Pierce, who had denied obsession from the moment she entered my courtroom, looked at the evidence screen with tears in her eyes, but not tears of remorse, tears of possession. That was when I realized something deeply unsettling. Allison did not believe she was harassing Daniel Carter. She believed she was rescuing him. And people who believe they are rescuing someone can justify almost anything. Olivia Bennett turned toward me and said, Your Honor, tomorrow we intend to introduce evidence showing Miss Pierce entered the Carter family's home. Daniel looked up sharply. Rachel whispered, No. Allison's eyes closed. For the first time, she looked afraid. And I remember thinking that the worst evidence had not yet entered the courtroom. It was waiting behind a locked front door. When Olivia Bennett said Allison Pierce had entered the Carter family's home, the courtroom reacted before I could speak. Rachel Carter whispered, No, so quietly that it was almost swallowed by the room. Daniel Carter sat forward, both hands flat on the table. Allison Pierce closed her eyes. That was the detail I watched, not Daniel's shock, not Rachel's fear. Allison's eyes. She did not look confused by the accusation. She did not turn to her attorney with outrage. She did not mouth the words, That's not true. She simply closed her eyes, as if the prosecutor had named something private, something she had not expected to be dragged into open court. And in that moment, I understood that the boundary had not just been crossed, it had been erased. Mark Ellison rose quickly. Your Honor, this allegation is inflammatory and unsupported. Olivia Bennett did not answer him directly. She placed a still image on the evidence screen. It was from the Carter family's doorbell camera. At first, the picture appeared ordinary. A front porch, 2 planters, a welcome mat, a porch light glowing softly in the darkness. Then the timestamp appeared, 2:11 a.m. The image showed a woman standing near the front door. Her face was turned slightly away, but her coat was visible. Her shoulder bag was visible. Her posture was visible. Allison Pierce, Rachel, covered her mouth. Daniel did not move, and I remember thinking that fear sometimes has stages. The first stage is disbelief. The second is confirmation. The third is remembering every night you thought you were safe. Olivia said the footage was recorded 9 days after Daniel changed his phone number and 4 days after the voicemail threatening Rachel's reputation. The woman on the porch did not ring the bell. She did not knock. She simply stood there. For 6 minutes may not sound long unless you imagine someone standing outside your home at 2:11 in the morning, saying nothing, doing nothing, waiting in the dark while your spouse and child sleep inside. The video played. Allison stepped closer to the window beside the door. She raised one hand and touched the glass. Not hard, just 2 fingers against the pane. Rachel began to cry silently. Daniel looked like he wanted to stand, but forced himself not to. Then Allison reached into her bag and took out something small, a folded paper. She slipped it beneath the door. Then she turned and walked away. The courtroom stayed quiet after the clip ended. Quiet in the way people become quiet when they realize the accused person's version of reality cannot hold the evidence anymore. Olivia turned to Rachel. "Mrs. Carter, did you find that note the next morning?" Rachel nodded from the witness stand. "Yes." "What did it say?" Her voice broke before the words came. Olivia placed the note on the screen instead. The handwriting was neat, beautiful, almost. It said, "I was closer than you think." That sentence disturbed me more than some shouted threats I have heard in criminal court because it was not written to persuade, it was written to invade. It was a message designed to turn a home into evidence of vulnerability. I looked toward Allison. Her eyes were open now. She was staring at the note with tears resting on her lower lashes. But again, those tears did not look like remorse. They looked like grievance, as if the note had meant something different to her. As if the rest of us were too ordinary, too cruel, too blind to understand. That is one of the dangers of obsession. It turns trespass into devotion. It turns intimidation into honesty. It turns another person's fear into proof of connection. Mark Ellison cross-examined Rachel carefully. He suggested the porch video did not show entry. He suggested the door may have been unlocked and the note could have been left by someone else earlier. He suggested Rachel's fear had made her interpret everything through suspicion. Rachel listened with her eyes down, then Mark asked, "Mrs. Carter, you cannot say Miss Pierce entered your home that night, can you?" Rachel looked up. "No." Mark nodded, as though he had found a foothold. Then Rachel said, "But she did enter later." The courtroom stilled again. Mark stopped. Olivia Bennett stood for redirect. "When?" she asked. Rachel's hand trembled against the witness rail. "The day of Sophie's recital." Daniel lowered his head. Rachel explained that the family had gone to Sophie's school recital on a Friday evening. They returned home around 9:30 p.m. At first, nothing looked wrong. No broken lock, no open window. No signs of forced entry. Then Sophie walked into her bedroom and screamed. Rachel paused there. The courtroom did not move. She said Sophie's room had been rearranged. Not destroyed, not ransacked, rearranged. Her stuffed animals had been lined across the bed. Her drawings had been stacked neatly on the desk. And on the pillow was another white envelope. Inside was a photograph of Daniel Carter. Not a family photograph, not one taken from social media. A photograph of Daniel sleeping in his own living room recliner, taken through the Carter family's window. Rachel's voice shook. She had been watching him sleep. There are moments when a courtroom's moral center shifts all at once. This was one of them. The jury did not need a legal lecture to understand the terror in that fact. A stranger, or someone pretending not to be a stranger, had watched a man asleep inside his home, photographed him, entered his child's room, and left proof. Proof not only that she had been there, proof that she could come back. Olivia displayed the photograph on the screen, partly redacted for privacy. Daniel's face was visible. The angle showed it had been taken from outside the living room window. Daniel could not look at it. That mattered. A person can describe fear and still sound distant. But when evidence makes the victim look away, the courtroom feels the wound directly. Olivia then called Detective James Miller. He testified that the Carter home showed no forced entry. That was initially a problem for investigators. But then they discovered something. A spare key hidden under a loose brick near the back patio had been moved. Daniel testified earlier that only close family knew where that spare key was. Allison should not have known. Then Olivia placed another exhibit on screen, a message Allison had sent months earlier before Daniel blocked her. "Your little brick trick is cute. Rachel really does trust the world too much." Rachel began crying again because now everyone understood that Allison had known about the key long before the break-in. Mark Ellison objected to the term break-in. I corrected the record to unauthorized entry, but the emotional truth remained. The home had been entered, the child's room had been touched, the family had been told, silently and precisely, that their private life was no longer private. Detective Miller then testified about fingerprints found on the envelope left in Sophie's room. A partial print was recovered. It matched Allison Pierce. Allison whispered something to her attorney. Mark Ellison leaned in, listened, then looked sharply at her. I have seen that look from defense attorneys before. It means the client has just said something that changes the strategy, and not in a helpful way. Mark requested a recess. I denied it until the detective finished the immediate foundation. Olivia asked one final question. Detective, did you find evidence that Miss Pierce had been inside the Carter home more than once? The detective hesitated. That hesitation carried weight. Yes. Rachel looked up sharply. Daniel turned toward the witness stand. Detective Miller explained that investigators found a small adhesive tracker attached under Daniel Carter's vehicle. It had been purchased online under a fake name. The payment card traced back to Allison. That alone was serious, but the tracker data was worse. It showed Daniel's vehicle had been monitored for 42 days. Work gym home, Sophie's school, grocery store, theater rehearsal location. Even after he stopped attending, every movement collected like a private map. Then Olivia Bennett placed a final photograph on the screen. It showed a storage box recovered from Allison Pierce's apartment. Inside were printed maps, photographs of Daniel's home, screenshots of Rachel's social media, copies of Sophie's school calendar, and more than 100 handwritten notes. At the top of the first page in Allison's handwriting were 5 words, ways to bring him back. Daniel closed his eyes. Rachel leaned into him, and Allison Pierce, sitting at the defense table, finally began to cry. But when she spoke, the words were not an apology. They were a confession of the world she had built inside her own mind. He was happier before she poisoned him. The courtroom froze. Mark Ellison turned toward her in panic. Allison, he whispered, stop. But she did not stop. She looked at Daniel Carter as though the courtroom, the judge, the evidence, the fear, the child, the wife, all of it was just noise between her and a story she refused to surrender. You know I saw the real you, she said. You know I was the only one who listened. I struck the gavel once. Miss Pierce remained silent. She did not look at me. She looked at Rachel, and then she smiled through tears, a small, broken smile. The house felt peaceful when you weren't there. That was when even I struggled to stay composed, because in that sentence, she admitted what the evidence had been leading toward all along. She had been inside the home, and in her mind, she had not invaded it. She had claimed it. When Allison Pierce said, the house felt peaceful when you weren't there, I felt the courtroom turn cold, not because the sentence was loud. It was not. She spoke softly, almost tenderly, as if she were describing a memory she cherished. That was what made it disturbing. A person who breaks into a home and understands it as a violation behaves one way. They panic, they deny, they minimize, they search for a legal excuse. But Allison did not sound like a trespasser. She sounded like a woman remembering a place she believed belonged to her. I ordered a recess immediately, not to protect Allison, to protect the integrity of the proceedings. When a defendant begins speaking against counsel's advice, the court must slow the room down. A courtroom cannot become a theater for uncontrolled confession, no matter how shocking the moment feels. The law must remain steadier than the people inside it. But I will tell you this honestly. Even after the courtroom emptied for recess, her words remained behind. The house felt peaceful when you weren't there. I sat in chambers with those words repeating in my mind because they did not sound like jealousy alone. They sounded like possession. And possession, when combined with surveillance, forced entry, and a child's school calendar, becomes more than obsession. It becomes danger. When court resumed, Allison Pierce looked different. Her attorney, Mark Ellison, had clearly spoken to her. She sat stiffly, eyes forward, lips pressed together. The tears were gone. Her face had returned to calm, but now the calm did not help her. Now it looked like the surface of deep water after something had disappeared beneath it. Olivia Bennett called Detective James Miller back to the stand. He testified that after the Carter family reported the unauthorized entry, police obtained a warrant to search Allison's apartment. What they found there, he said, changed the case from a protective order hearing into a criminal investigation. Olivia placed photographs on the evidence screen. The first showed Allison's living room, clean, organized, almost beautiful. A white couch, a narrow bookshelf. Framed theater posters on the wall. Nothing chaotic. Nothing that looked like the home of someone losing control. That is something people often misunderstand. A disturbed mind does not always live in a messy room. Sometimes it alphabetizes its evidence. The next photograph showed a closet. Inside were plastic storage bins labeled by month: January, February, March, April, May, June. Each bin contained printed screenshots, handwritten notes, receipts, photographs, and maps. The labels matched the timeline Olivia had shown us earlier, 284 days, but now those days had physical weight, box after box, month after month, a life being watched and cataloged. Daniel Carter sat very still. Rachel held his hand beneath the table. Olivia asked Detective Miller what was found in the January bin. He answered carefully. Early messages between Miss Pierce and Mr. Carter, printed and highlighted. What was highlighted? Any message from Mr. Carter that could be interpreted as positive or friendly. Olivia displayed one page. Daniel had written, "Thanks for helping with rehearsal." Allison had highlighted the word helping. Beside it, in handwriting, she wrote, "He trusts me." Another message from Daniel read, "Have a good night." Allison highlighted good night. Beside it, "He doesn't say that to everyone." The courtroom did not move because we were watching meaning being manufactured. That is one of the most important psychological patterns in cases like this. Obsession does not always begin with a lie told to others. It often begins with a lie someone tells themselves repeatedly until ordinary kindness becomes proof of destiny. Olivia then moved to the March bin. Inside were photographs of Daniel's office building, his gym entrance, and Rachel Carter's car parked outside a grocery store, a receipt from a coffee shop across from Daniel's workplace, a handwritten note. He came out at 5:42, looked tired. She is draining him. Rachel looked down. Daniel's jaw tightened. Mark Ellison objected to the interpretation of the note, but the note spoke for itself. It did not prove love. It proved surveillance. Detective Miller testified that police also found a printed floor plan of the Carter home. Rachel whispered, "How?" Olivia asked the same question. The detective said Allison had accessed public property records, old real estate listing photos, and renovation permits to reconstruct the layout. She had marked the living room window, back patio door, Sophie's bedroom, and the location of the spare key, the loose brick. The brick Daniel had mentioned casually months earlier when Allison still seemed like a friend. A single detail given in trust had been stored, studied, and eventually used. That is the cruelty of obsession. It turns intimacy into inventory. Olivia then displayed a photograph of a small black device recovered from Allison's desk. Detective Miller identified it as a GPS tracker, matching the type found under Daniel's vehicle. Another photograph showed receipts from 3 electronics stores. Another showed a notebook page with dates and locations: gym Monday, office Tuesday, Rachel's school drop-off, Sophie recital. Daniel's face changed when the recital appeared. That was the night Allison entered their home. Mark Ellison cross-examined Detective Miller by suggesting Allison was documenting harassment she believed she was receiving from the Carters. He argued that some people keep records when they feel threatened. He said printing messages and saving locations may be strange, but not necessarily criminal. That was not an absurd argument. People do keep records when afraid. But then Olivia asked one question on redirect. "Detective, in any of these notes, did Miss Pierce describe fear of Daniel Carter? No. Fear of Rachel Carter? No. Fear for her own safety? No. What did she describe?" The detective looked down at the file. Plans to remove obstacles. The courtroom became very quiet. Olivia placed the page on the screen. It was written in Allison's handwriting. Obstacles: Rachel, school, police, his guilt, his fear. Rachel began crying again. Daniel closed his eyes, and Allison, at the defense table, stared at the page as if she could not understand why everyone found it monstrous. That was the part that disturbed me most. She did not deny the words. She disagreed with the room's interpretation of them. Then Olivia said the search revealed something else. A locked drawer in Allison's bedroom. Inside was a small silver key, a disposable phone, several unsigned greeting cards, and a folded copy of the Carter family's emergency contact form from Sophie's school. Rachel stood halfway before Daniel gently pulled her back down. "How did she get that?" Rachel whispered. Detective Miller answered from the stand. Police did not yet know, but the emergency contact form listed Rachel's sister, Daniel's workplace, Sophie's pediatrician, and the private phone number Rachel had changed after the school envelope, private information. Information no outsider should have had. The case had widened again, not because Allison had been clever, because someone, somewhere, had given her access. Olivia called the theater director next, a woman named Carol Whitman. She testified that Allison had volunteered to help with administrative tasks during the theater season. Contact sheets, emergency numbers, cast schedules, rehearsal locations. Daniel's phone number had been listed there. His old number, not the new one. Olivia asked whether Allison had access to Daniel's home address. Carol hesitated. Yes, through volunteer reimbursement forms. And Sophie's school? No. That answer left the question hanging. The school form had not come from theater. It had come from somewhere closer. Then Olivia Bennett placed a subpoena response on the screen from a cloud printing service. 3 weeks earlier, Allison had printed several documents from an uploaded file. One file name appeared clearly. CarterHomeFinalPD. The upload source was an email account that did not belong to Allison. The courtroom became still. Olivia enlarged the sender address. It was not Daniel's, not Rachel's, not the theater director's. It belonged to someone named Megan Carter, Daniel's sister. Daniel whispered, "Megan?" Rachel turned toward him, shocked. Allison looked down for the first time all afternoon. Mark Ellison immediately requested a recess. This time, I granted it. Because if Daniel's own sister had provided Allison with private family information, then the case had just moved from obsession into betrayal. When we returned, Olivia informed the court that Megan Carter had been contacted and was outside the courtroom. Daniel looked devastated. Rachel looked as if another wall of safety had collapsed. The doors opened. A woman in her early 40s walked in slowly, eyes red, hands shaking around a tissue. She was Daniel's sister. And before she even reached the witness stand, Allison Pierce lifted her head and looked at her, not with fear, with disappointment, as if Megan had broken a promise. That was when I understood that Allison had not built this alone. Someone inside the family had opened the door, and the question now was why.